it cold in here? Can't tell if I'm sweaty from cold or from heat or from what. Feels cold.
I don't feel cold, but I rarely feel cold.
We're all set? And we are streaming?
We're streaming.
Okay. Apologies. Now I just need 1 second. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. We are now August 10th, 2021. We are starting our regular city council meeting here just a little late. We had some technical difficulties, but I'm told we're now streaming on YouTube and that feels good. We just had an executive session and now we're on to our regular city council meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Section 4 of our agenda, citizens to be heard. At this time, Summer, how many comments have we received online? Just one. So still just one comment online. Thank you. And if you are here to be heard, please, we'll just take you one at a time. So you're welcome to just come up as you will. If you've got the form that you filled out, once you speak, then you can put it in the basket. If you want to submit a comment but not be heard, you can just put it in the basket and sit back down. Who would like to come on up and join us first? Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Steph Davis. I know a couple of you, but not all of you. I have never been to a meeting like this before. I've owned my home for 20 years. I've lived in Moab for 25 years. I hope that when you look at me, you will see a lot of people behind me, because most people I know who are also long-term homeowners in Moab, we've been talking about nothing but this topic for the last couple of weeks. And most of my friends are either traveling a lot, working, busy, not so interested in coming to meetings, and I think that you guys may feel there hasn't been a high level of response on this issue, but perhaps in ways that you guys aren't seeing, there is a huge level of interest on all sides of the political spectrum. People are pretty upset, and people are pretty angry. We don't come to these meetings. We all vote. We all take that very seriously. And we know that's how our voices do get heard. So I hope that when you look at me, you will see maybe 50, 100 people behind me who I'm kind of here representing so that you guys can hear our voice. We are not happy about the idea of increasing property taxes. It's not very easy to live in this town for the average person. Prices are getting higher and higher. As you know, there's a housing crisis. Talking about increasing the police department, the last time I read an article in a paper about the police department, the entire article was about the fact that new police officers couldn't move to Moab because they couldn't afford housing. So a little ironic in the light of this topic. So, you know, we're not a normal town. Nothing in Moab is like any other town that I've ever lived in. 3 million people a year go through this town. They do not improve my quality of life at all. In fact, they degrade my quality of life. That's just me personally speaking. I know a lot of people benefit from it from a business perspective. In my opinion, that flow of transient people coming through this town represents a huge economic opportunity. If 3 million people paid $1 each, we wouldn't be being asked to pay the burden with property taxes. So I would like you to consider that. I know there's a lot of details, things that can and can't be done. Anything's possible. Y'all are really smart people. You're very creative people. There are a lot of ways to raise a budget. There are a lot of ways to balance a budget. I don't think the burden should be on the property owners and the actual simple residents of this town. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Oh, did you put that?
Yes.
Purple? Thank you so much. Who would like to be heard next? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Ian Machard. I live in Moab. I lived here since 2014. I work at the hospital right now, and just like Steph mentioned, I want to just echo the concern about raising property taxes by myself and many people that I've spoken to. It's an extreme burden for a lot of people to live here. Like I said, I worked at the hospital, and we have a hard time hiring people because they cannot afford to live here. And these property taxes are going to be passed down to the hard-working people that are trying to, provide services to this community that are not always directly benefiting from the $3 million, such as, the hospital. So I really feel that, the property taxes is kind of an archaic, old-style solution. It's a very easy solution. It passes the burden of this all to to everyone, as you mentioned, but a lot of that goes straight to the poor people. And there's a ton of people coming here for pleasure. There's a lot of people here with a lot of money, with second homes that are driving up the prices of housing. And I think that there's a lot of creative solutions that can be done to look at other ways of collecting this revenue, in addition to looking at the budget and making sure that it's balanced appropriately, and all the expenses are actually indeed needed. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Any comments?
I need to have them stand a little bit closer to the microphone so if you blank can hear them.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello again. Dear Mayor and City Council, while I'm still waiting on the answers to my questions in regards to the proposed property tax increase from last week, which I had also sent via email, I am taking this opportunity to be heard by you again, and I'm very grateful for this. The one thing I've heard from people visiting from other parts of the country in the last 18 months is that they are craving community. Their dream in pursuit of their happiness is either to set out to find an existing community or find a piece of land somewhere to build a community from ground up. I always think to myself, good luck, because community is rare and doesn't just happen overnight. Community grows, which takes patience, perseverance, and resilience. We might be divided over the hotels, the nightly rentals, the side-by-side, and lots of other things, but when push comes to shove, people here in Moab are there for one another. A true sign that Moab has a healthy community already. A community that was started many, many decades ago, which makes it a tremendous asset. It is unique, authentic, and rather solid, just like the landscape that surrounds us. An asset that is incredibly rare and valuable, an asset that needs to be protected. By increasing the tax rate during these challenging times, you will most certainly divide this solid community, dividing it into social and economic classes and political wings, ultimately introducing hierarchy which is based upon division and therefore possibly initiating a path to the community's complete demise. Diversifying revenue stream is a good idea, but useless when the worker bees can no longer afford to live in their hive. All of us who call Moab our home are so incredibly lucky to be able to be part of such a magnificent community. We should make every effort to ensure that we can all continue to live here and show our utmost respect and gratitude to the ones who planted the seeds of Moab's community so many years ago. Investing into this community is what will prepare us for the future, because only together, as community, will we be able to face whatever comes our way. The majority of the people who took their time and energy to be heard in these chambers last week were against the proposed tax increase. Please make us feel heard and supported, acknowledging that you are working for and with us with the priority of keeping this community intact. In 1956, a magazine article described Moab as the richest town in the USA, with more millionaires per capita than any place in the country. The uranium mine times are certainly over, but today Moab is still sitting on a hugely profitable mine. That mine is called tourism. Let's work on finding a way to keep the tourism dollars in the city instead of asking the miners to pay for the operation of the mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena, for your comments. Aaron, welcome, but where's your form?
It's right here.
Okay.
I wasn't allowed. No. Aaron Davies. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. I don't really have necessarily anything new. I think the main thing, it's about the taxes, what I'm about to speak about. And of course, a property tax is exactly contrary to affordable housing. It raises the cost of housing. The reason why housing is going up because we don't have enough. It's that simple supply and demand. It's not any one group that's buying that's making the problem. It's just that we don't have enough. Particularly, we don't have enough on the low end and the medium end. And as we broaden the market of housing, the prices will drop, and there'll be enough housing. We just need more, and particularly at the lower end. Apartment buildings are a great idea. I know that many have been proposed, not many have passed. So I would just say that, well, back to the taxes, really. I would ask that you not raise the taxes. I understand that you're trying to do a lot of good work, and it does take some money to do that work. I would ask that rather that the efforts be made to be more creative, to find the solutions without raising the taxes. A lot of people can't afford it. Some can, and I don't think that even those that some can is not a good reason to do this. I understand it doesn't take too much effort to find something to spend all that money on, but that doesn't mean we should do it. And just because other cities are doing it is no reason. Any parent knows that that's not a reason to do something. When your kid comes home and says, I'm gonna do this because Johnny's doing it. We all know as parents, no. That's not a good reason. It is an amazing place. Almost all of us here because we really choose to be here. Not the easiest place to live, but we choose to be here because it is an amazing place. A lot of very intelligent, creative, very talented people choose to be here. It's not a normal city in that sense. And I think if we can find ways to come together, even with people we think we don't agree with, that creativity can come forward. And I think we can find ways to get what is needed in the city rather than asking for more money. And I think that's part of the point, is to look at what is needed rather than what is wanted. Because we're so creative and diverse, there's a lot of different things that we want. But maybe all those things that we want, we really can't afford. We've gone through a difficult time, all of us. The government, businesses, employees, everyone has had to really tighten up their belt and find a way to exist. Even with all the federal taxpayer funds that have been shot into us, it's still been difficult. If this happens, the way I figure it, we could have 4 tax increases in 3 years if this is passed, depending on how you arrange what you're looking at. But have the tax increases now seems like the timing is just not right. I would just ask, try really hard to find ways to afford what's needed, truly needed. Infrastructure is needed, rather than asking for more money. The thing about government is it's a self-perpetuating organism. And if more taxes are asked for, more taxes will be asked for, and it just continues. And while we are a city, we are small. I would just ask that burden not be put on us, but rather that hard work be done. I'm willing to help with that. I think other people are willing to help with that. And I just ask that you don't raise the taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, for your comments. Trish, were you going to comment?
I realized that I didn't set the tone. My name is Trish West. I was here last week and spoke as well. I didn't set the tone well when I commented about the gentleman trying to fix the camera. But I think it illustrated his activity was just kind of que sera, if I fall, oh well, someone will pick up the pieces. And I feel like that is a good metaphor for kind of what's happening here. The Moab people are being asked to pull together to put some pieces together. Earlier, or during the real shutdown last year, my husband and I went around town, and I drove and he wrote down addresses and pole numbers of light poles that were not working. They were either off or flashing or whatever. We did it in the daytime too, and the ones were flashing. And I worked back and forth with UPNL and the manager for, I don't know his name, that would deal with that. It took weeks to get those all figured out. And I was told that, well, we don't know they're out unless someone tells us. And I thought to myself, we have people driving around this town every day, checking buildings, looking for cars, whatever. They're called police officers. Why aren't they telling City Works that these lights are out? That's the kind of work I think has been lost, that we can help you, you help us. I am a stickler for liability because I recognize that the deep pockets are always there. We just came out of a lawsuit situation with the former administrator. The city knows about that. People got pretty upset about that. So I think there have been some opportunities that, or I don't know the opportunity is the right word. I think there's been some incidents where we've kind of asked, and I say we because I'm part of this community too, we've let someone else pick up the pieces, and we're asking for someone else to pick up the pieces. I was encouraged by what Aaron said. He's offering to help with solutions. I would put my name on that list. I have some pretty good ideas sometimes. One of the solutions I thought of tonight, and I don't know if it's possible, I don't know the rules, but sales tax, is that maxed? We all pay it. If it's not maxed, that's one thing. But is it possible for locals to get a rebate? And there's going to be more sales tax generated, but could locals get a rebate that would offset the property tax that you're asking for? I know that the property tax being in place opens some funding doors for the city. You mentioned that about bond ratings and things like that. So maybe there is a good trade-off, but locals are the ones that are paying sales tax too. I spoke to a renter this morning. I said, did you hear, what do you think about the property tax? Is it going to be voted on tonight? Do you think they'll pass it? He says, oh, I don't know. It doesn't really bother me. It doesn't affect me. I don't own any property. And I said, oh. He said, yeah, I just rent. And I said, well, it probably will affect you. And he said, do you think they'll raise my rent? And I said, I think they definitely will raise your rent. This is a pass-through tax. So I don't know if that community was reached out to, that it was just going to be with the property owners. I don't know that renters were actually told how this could impact them. I don't know how much communication there is between landlords and tenants that way. I came across a document that was interesting to me, talking points, I believe. It was pointed out last time that there's several people that are making over $100,000, and the number got way inflated. But according to the talking points from the city, 8 people earn over $100,000 in salary, and 1 person earns over $90,000 in salary. If the property tax does not go in, that you're going to vote on tonight, I assume, if that is not passed, if I read the budget information correctly, that represents 1/10 of the current city budget for 9 people's wages. I would ask, does that include the benefits? The response I got was, no, that's an addition. So I think that's a big percentage of the budget for 9 people when you're wanting so much other to come from the taxpayers. I thank you for your time, and I do extend my offer. Thank you.
Thanks, Trish. I think that's everybody that is sitting in the chambers. So thank you all for coming and being heard tonight during our Citizens to be Heard section of our agenda. We're now moving on to section 5, administrative reports. Joel, City Manager.
Thanks, Mayor. We, on Monday, at the direction of our local healthcare officials and Dr. Cole, instituted a mask order in City Hall and public facilities owned by the city. So if residents or people are coming into City Hall, we'd ask them to mask up and social distance where they can and try and support our healthcare professionals in that request. Must have been a slow news day up north because apparently it's all over the news that we put a mask order back in at City Hall. I don't know what's worse, if it's that slow of a day or that makes news. I don't know that should be a news story, but I guess it is. Sign-ups for municipal elections started today. We've had a candidate sign up already, and they run through August 17th. And so anyone who is interested in running for the mayor position or one of the 2 council seats that are available, come into City Hall and go to the recorder's office, and Summer will provide you the necessary information and the inch binder full of reading that comes with that sign-up. It's quite a lot of information. So, but that runs through next Tuesday. We have been meeting with our regional governments locally here about flooding and what we're doing about that with San Juan County. Those meetings continue. I cannot thank the county and San Juan County and just everyone for the amount of help that they've been and just the cleanup and everything. Those meetings continue, and we're not quite out of the monsoon season yet. And so hopefully this down week and a half, 2 weeks that we've had right now have really given us some time to do some more preparations. But Carly's been instrumental in those meetings and has done a really good job setting them up, and I want to thank her for what she does in those, getting those going and keeping them with an agenda and everything else. So she does an amazing job. Again, I want to mention to everyone that the Utah Independent Redistricting Commission is full scale at this point. The webpage is up, and everyone here locally in Moab needs to get involved in that. It's really important. We have been split into 2 districts for 10 years, and we're really fighting hard to get us all into one district, and all of us have one representative that we can reach out to and have a little more weight in our collective districts. So please, everyone, get involved in that. And other than that, I met with the DWS yesterday with the mayor and had about a 2-hour discussion about housing with the governor's office. It was really productive, and I thought it went really well. And John Curtis is coming tomorrow, and there's an open house here at Moonstone.
Town Hall.
Oh, excuse me. Town
That
Hall.
has been noticed at
Star Hall.
Star Hall.
Okay.
However, we are set to help make accommodations if he wants to move that town hall outside, but not, that determination hasn't been made yet.
Yeah, and we have taken all the steps to make sure that can happen if it needs to. So that's.
What time is that? Sorry.
It is at, oh gosh, what is it, 5:30?
Yes.
Yeah, 5:30. I don't want to say the wrong time, but I have 5:30 on my brain, so. 5:30 at Star Hall, and it should last an hour.
That's
He
it.
he usually has a hard stop after an hour.
If you've not attended one of Representative Curtis's meetings, I highly suggest you do. They're really good. He does a great job of answering questions in a manner that allows for true dialogue and not fluff, and making sure he doesn't get deep into politics. He'll actually answer questions, and they're pretty rewarding to go to, so I recommend everyone go. That's it, man.
Thank you, Joel. And no other staff to report tonight, correct?
Not tonight, we have plenty on the agenda tonight. So.
Okay, then we'll move on to section 6, mayor and council reports. I will go forced. Mary McGann asked me to be on a call with Senator Romney's office. The question or the statement that we reiterated was that with this infrastructure bill, we're hopeful that we will see language that says fix it first as opposed to funding new projects. So that was a nice meeting to have. It feels like the past 2 weeks were like floods, winds, and taxes. So I know a lot of us have been fielding calls about property tax, and I just want to thank this council for meeting with community members, understanding the budget more deeply, and being a voice of, trying to explain why we're throwing the spaghetti on the wall right now to see if it sticks in terms of property tax. Like Joel mentioned, Department of Workforce Services came down, this was yesterday, and it's kind of a big deal. It was their leadership team and their housing department. They don't usually come in person, and certainly when they come down, usually they're meeting just with their staff. But I've been poking the bear and saying, hey, we need help on the housing front, and so they were willing to come for a special meeting with us. So attendees of that meeting included the Multicultural Center. We talked about housing issues for our Native residents that are transient, and transportation opportunities for them. We talked about the J1 visa program and the HB visa program, and how, while they're good programs, there has been some, companies have different levels of accommodations they provide their workers, which make them complicated. But that is certainly attributing to a lack of workforce today. We also had Four Corners there talking about housing folks that need more services than just housing, and how it's extremely difficult for them to find housing. Community Rebuilds was there, Housing Authority was there, and it was a really good back and forth with the state, where we were kind of painting our picture and sharing our needs. And then it was asked back to us, well, what can we do to solve? And so we invited them to listen to our housing portion of our agenda tonight, so that we can share some of the solutions that we're looking at, but also money, money to solve problems. So there was excitement toward the end of the meeting about hopefully a deeper collaboration with us to solve some housing. So hopefully more soon. And a couple events coming up. So tomorrow, reminder that our most excellent police department is having a party. It is Officer Appreciation Day at the pool, and it's going to be free, and we're going to have hot dogs to celebrate our officers. So if you like swimming or hot dogs or both, that'll be from 1:30 to 4:30. Also, the churches are coming together to do a 9/11 event this year. So as you know, it's the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. And so the leaders of our religious institutions are coming together. They're doing an event at Swanee. They've already got their permit secured. We have chosen to do a free swim day on 9/11, and it's going to be an all-day event at the park celebrating first responders locally, but then also those of the country. And there's going to be a chili cook-off. The fire department's going to come and spray the kids down with their fire truck, and so there's going to be a lot of events. Little events throughout the day happening at Swanee Park. So I just wanted to let you all know that that is happening, and that's it from me. Ronnie.
Okay, I don't have a lot. I spent most of my time trying to learn more about property tax and talking to people, writing up stuff I was learning. We all, just I'll cover this so you guys don't have to unless you want to comment on it, had our Truth and Taxation meeting August 4th. And a well site tour on August 6th. And in my talking with various people, I was just going to ask staff, and it might be a question for you, Summer, just to let you know that I had a conversation with the League of Women Voters, and they have a lot of educational materials about ranked choice voting, so I wasn't sure, or you two, Joel, what we thought our education, it's the first time we're all doing it, so we're all going to be learning how to vote that way, but they just wanted to make sure the city knew they have a lot of educational materials, and they're happy if we contact them.
Yeah, I would glad to.
Sorry, that's it.
Oh, thank you, Ronnie. Mike?
It's pretty quick. Mine will be quick. Also, the Grand Water meeting got canceled last week. I want to thank staff, Chuck and Levi, for taking us out to see wells and springs and stuff like that. It was very informative, so thank you guys. But there's not too much actually new stuff to report, so I guess that's about it for me.
Thanks, Mike. I think we all have spent a lot of time on property taxes and budgets, so.
We've all spent a lot of time on property tax, and
Yeah.
I know lots about wells that I think made me lose a lot of sleep. I don't have anything, except I left some of these flyers out on the table. This is Grand County's flood damage information. If you have property or you live in the county and you have debris, or you have limbs or anything like that, if you will move that out of your yard into the right-of-way, the Grand County Road Department will come and remove that for you. There is a phone number on there to call. It's Monday through Thursday, 7:30 to 7 o'clock in the morning till 5:30 at night, and you will probably talk to me. If you live in the city, there is a website on here. The county would like you to also report your damage on this county website, because the county has to meet a threshold of damage before we can ask for federal aid and FEMA can come in. So it's not saying that you will get reimbursed or your damages will be paid for, but it adds to the county threshold, so that if we meet that threshold, then there will be opportunity for people to possibly benefit from FEMA dollars or federal dollars.
For those people watching on YouTube, how do you get that website link? Is it go to the Grand County website?
It is.
And look for flood?
Grand County, Utah, all lowercase, Utah is spelled out, .net/flood.
Oh, easy.
Easy peasy.
I thought you were going to go longer, and I was like, oh, get your pencils.
Nope.
And that's it?
That's it.
Thanks, Tawny. Karen?
I attended my monthly chamber board meeting. There was a discussion on the upcoming discourse with Arches National Park with the superintendent and the reservation system, and how, if it was implemented, what we can do as businesses to help support it to be as smooth as possible, and to give some input on things that we would like to see in terms of how it was implemented, what sort of discussions would be possible for locals. Do they have to also sign up with the with the federal website in order to get in? There's a bunch of questions. So, and I think quite a few of us are having those discussions individually with representatives from the national parks this week. The chamber board has also been invited by Senator Mike Lee to Washington, D.C. At our own expense to represent rural Utah businesses, and that's in October. Colin Fryer with Red Cliffs Lodge is being inducted into the Tourism Hall of Fame at the Utah Tourism Conference this week. It's an honor to be recognized and quite an accomplishment that one of our own residents is being appreciated at a state level. And there was also quite a bit of discussion on how to keep businesses engaged in the property tax proposal discussion. I participated in an introduction meeting between EcoBox, which is a container shipping housing opportunity, with administration and planning to discuss container-style building and maybe if it could be applicable here in Moab. At our airport board meeting, Andy Solzvig has, I think he's going to be presenting tonight. Is he presenting? So I will let him talk. but he made us aware this afternoon that the Senate passed the 5-year $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. So that's going to be exciting for every community to try to be prepared for that. Public hearing on the truth in taxation. I want to thank everybody who wrote to us and who showed up. I know it can be intimidating and scary, but all of us really appreciate your thoughts and comments. We had our well site visit, which everyone mentioned as well, and I just want to say thanks to Chuck, Levi, Ken, Ryan, and Conrad for keeping our water supply running smoothly and so purely. So that's it.
Thanks. Probably worth to mention too, with the award with Colin Fryer, there's another local that's actually getting award at the same conference, and that's Elaine Gisler. So she's actually in line to receive, and it's a national award. When you said that, it just reminded me for the Do It Like a Local campaign.
Well, I didn't know that.
Under the category of destinations, council destinations, or advocacy and grassroots campaign. So for her efforts over like the past several years to pivot from marketing Moab as a destination to sharing, marketing how to behave once you get here. I mean, all the new billboards that we see about Moab are now all about how to behave responsibly when you're here. So Elaine is receiving an award for that as well. Same, in the same vein as Colin being inducted in the tourism. At the same conference, but probably worth it. And I did also find out that she is resigning from the county. So it's very, very bittersweet information to share about Elaine. Thanks, Karen. Kevin?
I attended a Moab Area Housing Task Force meeting, and the primary discussion topic was identifying and prioritizing meaningful changes to city and county codes, ordinances, zoning regulations, et cetera, that the task force could champion to support affordable housing. And it seems like one of our primary reference documents was the ones that staff here have generated for our discussions. And it seemed like it was successful in getting higher attendance. It was a pretty free-ranging discussion, but hopefully it eventually leads to sort of some concrete ideas. I attended the Community Renewable Energy Agency Board, and we passed our procurement policy and created an outreach and low-income plan committees and appointed communities to the Program Design Committee, which is actually, it's kind of a mysterious name, but it is basically the framework in which power will be produced and delivered and billed for. So it's technical, but it's kind of at the heart of this program. So let's move it along. That's what I've got.
Is that the 100 communities? Is that the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
These are 100 communities.
You're talking 100. Gotcha.
Yep. That's all.
Thanks, Kaylin. I forgot one other thing. So if you look in the back of the hall here, that painting, it's dark, so you can't really see it. The painter, his name is Otho Murphy. When I was elected, Dan Mick came in, and I was like, what is he going to talk to me about? And he said, you need to find that painting and make sure it's secure. And, it's here in the city, and I guess the city owns it, but I'd really hope that it be owned by the museum, and that eventually it makes its way to the museum. And I took Oscar to the museum, and it was lovely. And they have a mini version of that painting. So I called Tara down, who's the collections person, and I said, hey, we've got the painting here at City Hall. Anyway, long story short, the museum would like that painting. And so I'm actually asking for stories about how we acquired that painting, and if hopefully we can get behind who really owns it to be able to give it back to the museum, give it to the museum for permanent collection. So call out for who really does in fact own that painting. Okay, and that's it in terms of reports. We will move on in our agenda, the approval of the minutes for July 27th, 2021. Is there a motion?
I will move to approve the moments. I want to thank Summer for correcting a few clarifications I had, and I think Ronnie might have had some also.
Thank you, Mike, for that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ronnie. Discussion. So 2 corrections from you both. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Presentation. So we are now set to receive a presentation from Andy from the airport, but patience with all of us. We're hopeful that we're able to get Andy to zoom in. If we have a problem with this, we can always move this presentation to our next council meeting as he's not able to participate in person. But here he is. So, hi, Andy.
Good evening, everyone.
Now,
Can you hear
listen,
me?
I can hear you. I can see you. I also can see Laurie, our city attorney. Hi, Laurie, who's also participating remotely. But yes, Andy, we can see you well. And thank you so much for participating in our meeting with us remotely. Now, can you see us?
I cannot see you, but I was pre-informed that that's fine. I do have you on YouTube, but we can, as long as I can hear you, we're okay.
Awesome.
Members of the city council, city staff, and the public, I'm Andrew Solzig, Airport Director for Canyonlands Regional Airport. What I want to present to you tonight is some information from an economic development study that the state has recently completed. And I guess I'll just jump into it, and then after that we can help answer any questions.
Wonderful.
Okay, if you bear with me, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the last page here because this will help to explain how the information is put together. So first of all, the Utah UDOT, Department of Transportation State Aeronautics Department, put this together. The previous study or report was completed in 2005, so it's been a while. But it's important information to share with the community and show the benefits of what the airport brings, as well as some of the financial information. So the methodologies that we look at include you have your what's called direct impacts, your indirect impacts, and then a multiplier effect. And this chart will show a little bit of that. So your direct impacts are jobs and activity strictly from and at the airport. The people that actually work at the airport, the various groups and users. So we have, I'm just going to run down a quick list, but the airline staff, TSA, Redtail, which is our fixed-based operator that does fueling and scenic tours. You have Pinnacle Helicopters, skydiving, anything really associated, and then including county staff. So we are the ones that run the airport itself, but you also have shuttles, taxis, UPS, so there's cargo, there's life flights. When we had a lot of the fires going on, we had a tremendous amount of helicopter activity being indirect, but there's a lot of different users at the airport that I think a lot of people don't realize. And especially through COVID, because we're an essential air service market, the airline was contractually obligated to fly into our station in order to get the subsidy. So even though it may have been one or just a few people on the flight, it was very important because it kept the jobs, kept people working ultimately. And so I want people to be aware of that, the importance of something, we understand, well, like, why are they flying the flights? Well, if we lose TSA, they might not come back because we've been through this before in the past, and that was a real threat. So we wanted to make sure everyone was still employed and receiving a paycheck during that difficult time. And fortunately, there were stimulus funds. But I want to point out, though, that this data is actually based on mostly 2018 information. It's just a snapshot in time, possibly into early 2019. but I think these numbers are low that I'm going to show you. So what we look at, they measure the employment, your annual payroll, annual spending, and then ultimately come up with your economic activity. So people's wages, what they're spending in town, whether they live here or not. If you think about it, back in 2018, there's a couple big projects going on at the airport. I believe a terminal expansion, as well as some runway work. So think about all those workers associated with those jobs that are in the area, maybe even if it's temporarily, they're buying groceries and spending money and renting things, stuff like that. So again, this is really a good snap or indicator of the direct impacts, the money spent, and then the multiplier effect. If you think of the spend in town, that circulates through the community several times. And so that's what that multiplier effect is. And I think on average, it's about 2 to 2.5 times on the formula. So indirect activity, you could look at what are people doing? They're getting hotel rooms, they're buying food, they're buying, renting vehicles or mountain bikes or things in town that are a result of these passengers coming into our area as tourists. So that's how it's formulated. Now I'm going to jump up to the main numbers here, back at the top. And the numbers look big. When you look at 488 jobs, I did receive a phone call from somebody saying, how is there 488 people working at the airport? There isn't 400 people working at the airport. We definitely have over 100, but this is kind of the cumulative of when you look at the direct and indirect, okay? So 17.1 in payroll, over 28 million in annual spending, a total economic impact of close to $46 million. So that's where that comes from. And then you look at your local, state and local tax revenue that brings, as well as the 10-year development cost. That was really at that capital improvement projects were coming up within the next 10 years. And that's obviously a couple years ago. So we've completed a few of those already. So this will provide some information. The airport benefit, this just talks about exceeding its annual needs. There's a lot of pavement out there that we need to redo or add to because demand has increased. So we actually are going to be looking at how do we expand our aircraft parking spaces as some projects. But there's a lot of maintenance involved as well. So here's a closer breakdown. So I'm going to move this here real quick. Now this gets into the actual numbers at that time. So when you look at the employment, you'll see the direct, indirect, and total. And again, if you scroll down the various categories, that's where you get the 488 number. So it's all broken out for you.
You asked me to wait for just a second.
Hey, Andy, can you hold up for just 1 second?
Sure.
We are having a momentary technical difficulty.
Okay.
But, I mean, for what it's worth, the presentation is still live and.
It's just, it's got a block in the way. Sorry.
No worries.
It's still on YouTube.
It's still going. I just want to get everything back.
Escape.
Are
Control,
you able to
Alt,
see the
delete?
screen?
Is that still a thing? No.
Okay.
You're good to go.
Andy,
We're
thank
good?
you.
Okay, great. Do I need to repeat anything?
Nope.
Good with the employment numbers? Okay. So we have the employment. This is what they calculate based on their surveying at that time. They looked at total payroll of the employment and what that looks like. So you have your direct and indirect, your total. So that's where that 17.1 million number came from. And what are people spending in town? And so they kind of do what your average spending is, whether you're local or not a local. In fact, the average number they used, it seemed low to me. I want to say $288 or less than $300 per tourist. And so that's probably increased since a few years ago. But, if that's what it is, that's what it is. And it's still a decent number, especially for this community. And then when you look at the total economic activity, that's where you get your 45.9 million number here at the lower right. So it's all broken out right there. Again, I feel based on the activity that we've seen or likely going to be seeing, this number is low. And the state does do or should be doing this study every 5 years. It's a great way to look at the activity over a long-term period. So hopefully in 5 years now, we'll get another update. We'll see, hey, maybe we decreased, maybe we increased, maybe we stayed flat, but it gives us a good indicator of what's going on. So benefits, again, I talked about the airport, construction, visitor industry, and then again, sales tax. I mean, think about even when somebody buys fuel for their aircraft, there's a tax associated with that that goes to the state, which helps to fund airport initiatives and infrastructure projects, et cetera, along with your local sales tax. So it's pretty significant. And then this is real interesting too. The percent of flight plans. Now the flight plans are not just commercial. We always think of commercial airlines when we think of flights. We're fortunate to have Denver for a long time and now Salt Lake as of recent. But this gives you an indication of where general aviation activity or flights are coming from. It's pretty much all over the nation. And so these little bubbles here to show that more concentration of folks are coming from these areas. And that gives us just a better idea that, hey, people like coming here. They want to come here mainly for leisure, as we know. But it's definitely on the map. And I think give kudos to the tourism. They certainly have done a good job. But I think people just want to get outside. It'll be interesting to see how things, if they level off at all or not. But let's see. Then airport system, Russell, what this gets into, like I mentioned, it's a state study. So they look at all of the airports throughout the state of Utah, and each airport gets a similar study just as this. And then I'm not really going to pay attention to the facility and service objectives. That's outdated already. And I think we're heading in the right direction as far as the airport goes. And then this shows you just a map of all the various airports throughout the state, and then Canyonlands Regional. So when you look at, this is interesting because this chart shows all of the airports without Salt Lake City Airport. And that's those numbers. But look at the impact that Salt Lake International has to the state. It's pretty significant. It's a major hub for Delta Airlines, and every airline flies there, but you can see what they bring to the table. And then I'm just going to scroll down some of the information. You can look at it, just the various impacts on different sizes of airports and whatnot. And so the bigger picture is out of the 635 million, we may only represent 2.1 of that, but I think we'll grow in time. So that's the report. Any questions on the report itself?
Council, do you have any questions for Andy?
Actually, Andy,
I'll bring it back up.
if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, because we are in our budget process, and I kind of wanted to give some kudos to you because you have brought in significant amounts of money for the county, and I was just curious if you're open to sharing how much grant money you have received at the airport, which in turn has freed up budgets for the county to not to have to pay for those funds. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Sure thing, and thank you for bringing that up. I think it is really important for the community and for everyone to understand. Through the federal stimulus funds that went out there, the airports as a whole, as a nation, were able to receive some significant money. So I'm not going to take any credit for it because it was really just circumstance. And because of our status with entitlement funding, the airport was able to receive 3 different stimulus grants of $1 million each. And why that is significant is because it's above and beyond the funds that we would receive for infrastructure projects. These were grants allocated specifically to support airport budget for O&M and debt service expenses. That has kept us afloat. If you look at roughly, and this isn't what our budget is, but it's roughly, let's just say $800,000, the general fund or some other support through tax dollars was supporting about 60 to 70% of the budget. And so if you think about that, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that's going not needed from the general fund as of this year. Partially that was returned from last year because it wasn't needed. And so we're able to spread those $3 million, 3 different grants at $1 million each roughly, and really support our budget. So we're looking at not relying on any local taxpayer dollars for the next few years as a result of that, which is significant. Now, that being said, there will come a time where we will have some reliance, but I'm hoping that the airport can set itself up through various lease agreements and other revenue generators to where at least that percentage will become smaller and the airport will bring in more revenue to support its own budget. And I think in long term, maybe it'll eventually get to the point of being self-sustainable, because it really should be considered and looked at as an enterprise fund type of department.
So Andy, I got a question for you, Mike here. How heavily, percentage-wise, is the total airport operations subsidized? And another way to ask the question, for example, how much would what would now be a $100 ticket to most anywhere cost you if all the various federal, state, and local subsidies and so forth were to go away?
I'm going to actually unshare my, is anybody I'll get to that question. I just figured that way you can see my face. Is there any questions on the economic study, or do you want me to leave it up?
No. I just think what I'm trying to point out, and I want to be certain of, is I think it's heavily subsidized. All right, that's my impression. And I just want, what are the likelihood that sort of subsidies will continue in the years to come, or are they likely to be terminated with the whims of federal politics in particular?
Fair question. So we are an essential air service market. Any market that was receiving air service prior to 1978 is eligible to get essential air service contract if they are of a certain size, or just Moab is a great example. So I don't anticipate that program going away. There's no indicators saying it would, but there may come a day that it could. And it has been threatened in the past where essential air service markets and their states needed to fight and make a good argument of, hey, we want to keep these funds. We need these, I mean, it's basically a grant, a stimulus grant for air service to serve this kind of market. And because of our remoteness, proximity to Salt Lake City, we're still 100 miles from Grand Junction, and with the growth, I mean, I think we have good reasons to maintain it. It's really a federal decision, but something that we want to push for years to come.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Andy?
Any airport questions even? You have me on the spot. So.
When are you going to start vending hot dogs?
You know, we would love to do vending. We've had a lot of interest. I would love to have a food truck up there, honestly. The issues that we have with our terminal is there's no water and drainage in the area that we would have available in the terminal itself. So there would need to be some infrastructure completed in order just to have that, unless we did some sort of grab and go. But then even with the food truck idea, we need to have 210 electrical put into the area where it might go, because that's not available currently, and that's the reason why it hasn't been successful.
Other questions for Andy? Well, thanks for joining us tonight to give a presentation of how airport equals tourism and tourism dollars.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Good night. Sorry, technology. Excellent. Okay. Well, then we'll move on to section 9 of our agenda, Old business 9.1, the proposed resolution 22-2021, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget and proposed tax increase for the city of Moab. So we did have staff come together, and we all worked on this. And thanks to Lisa for going through and calling sort of what was frequently asked questions and frequently made comments at our public hearing. So we did put together some information that I'm going to read right now as we go into this agenda item, just to get us started, but for the benefit of the community, because we did see a pattern of comments made. So I will just get started with this. So the first was, why can't Grand County and the city, if a property tax is reinstated, tax only second homeowners and overnight accommodations like hotels and overnight apartment and home rentals, and levy no tax on full-time residents? So that is a state law that prohibits us as a city from selectively taxing different types of properties. And the percentages are set by state law. So the state says you can tax at 100% for non-residents and 55% for residents, but you have to tax everybody that owns property. You can't pick and choose. Why do tax valuations of properties continue to go up, which also increases property taxes? So reminder that it's not Moab City that does property evaluations and assessments. It is the Grand County Assessor that sets the property evaluation, and they do so every 5 years as required by state law. So state law requires that assessed property values fall within a certain range of current market value. If the county did not reassess values or failed to assess properties close enough to that range, the state would likely take control of the process and assess all properties at 100% of market value. So it is important to note that our assessor's office is not pushing that 100% market value in their assessment. There is a relationship between the assessed value and taxes due. Broad changes in assessed value will create tax shifts, and that affects different properties in different ways. For example, if property values increase 10% overall countywide, a property with a 5% value increase could see a decrease in taxes. Conversely, if the overall county values increased 10%, and a property only decreased 5%, the tax on this property could increase. Otherwise, property taxes only increase across the board when one of the taxing entities increases its tax rate. The question about salaries and benefits, that salaries and benefits seem to be a large part of the city's budget. Why have staff numbers increased? Why are so many employees making so much? And why can't the city just tighten its belt? So as the city continues to grow, the level of service required also grows. As tourism grows, the level of service grows. And as the level of service required increases, more staff has been needed to provide those services at the necessary levels. However, in the past 2 years, the city has actually decreased staff through hiring freezes, layoffs, and retirements or departures. The city also reduced other expenses through a spending freeze that is still in effect. In 2020, the city eliminated 3 full-time positions. In 2019, the city had 83 full-time employees and 63 part-time workers. In 2021, 2 years later, the city went from 83 full-time to 77 full-time employees and from 63 part-time to 51 part-time. This is 10 more full-time and 5 more part-time employees than in 2016. So we do have more than in 2016, but 6 fewer full-time employees and 12 fewer part-time than in 2019. I think we're trying to illustrate that we've done what we can to tighten our belt while still, addressing the growth needs, the staffing needs as the city has grown. Several residents have said that 30 employees earn more than $100,000 annually, and 50 employees earn more than $900,000. In actuality, the city does have 8 employees who earn $100,000 or more in salary, and 1 employee who earns $90,000 or more in annual pay. In 2016, the city conducted a comprehensive salary survey through Personnel Systems, Inc. Salary determinations are made by a rating and ranking system that was established in 2016 through a salary survey. This was done to provide salaries competitive to comparable positions outside the city and balance employee recruitment and retention with managing costs. Just a few more. What has changed that has resulted in the city no longer being able to balance its budget? That's been a misconception. The city budget has been balanced every year as required by law, and the city can operate within that budget. But in order to start chipping away at the $60 million needed capital improvement projects, so that includes streets, water, sewer, stormwater, sidewalks, curb and gutter, parks, etc. And in order to provide additional services, the city needs to raise additional revenue, or at least put together a mechanism that we can borrow. It is important to note that Grand County does not provide water or sewer services. So again, Grand County does not provide water or sewer services. It has a special service district that provides those services to county residents. That district also ties into the city's sewer lines, and the city processes the sewer waste from those county customers, and hookup and service fees for that service are paid to the city via that district. So what did the fiscal 21 expense figures, why did the fiscal 21 expense figures change so much from the tentative budget presented in April to the fiscal year 21 expenses shown in the final proposed budget available in the August 4th council packet? So there was the budget changing question. The tentative budget presented in April included year-to-date actual expenses that were current through December 2020. The final proposed budget presented in early August included final expenses for fiscal year 21 that are current through June 2021 and revenues current through May 2021. Since fiscal year 21 did not end until June 30 of this year, the actual final expenses for that year were not available until after the fiscal year ends. So naturally, the expense numbers would be higher once all 12 months were included. So it was a timing thing. It wasn't meant to be like a bait and switch or deception or not being transparent with what we were posting as part of our budget. What about people who can't afford their property tax? Is there any help available? There has been help available for a very long time. The state of Utah, because people have been paying taxes for a very long time through Grand County. The state of Utah provides several relief programs for tax relief. The first is tax abatement. The second is tax exemption. So those are folks that are, so the tax abatement, if your gross household income for 2020 is less than $34,666, and you also meet one of the following: that you're turning 65 or older, that you're disabled, that you're a widow or widower who hasn't remarried, or you're experiencing an extreme hardship, you qualify. So, you know, it's easy for us to say, well, what about the people that aren't going to be able to pay? There are services in place for that tax abatement for them under that criteria. And then tax exemption, the blind, veterans with a service-related disability, and active duty military. In all cases, tax relief only applies to someone's primary residence and up to 1 acre of land. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that we felt that were repeated at our public hearing. And certainly there are more questions that are broader, policy-based questions and questions that are more nuanced, like, you know, the logistics of it all, of how to pay your property tax. So hopefully at least that gets us started today. I did not ask Ben to prepare any presentation for tonight, or Joel or any staff, because it's really on us as council now to lead forward with this process, to have a discussion, to have good deliberation amongst ourselves. Staff is certainly here to answer our questions, but to move the ball forward. And reminder that we do need to pass our budget, which will include the property tax increase if we so choose to move forward with that. If not tonight, then at our next council meeting, because it is most important that we pass it by, what is our deadline?
August 31st.
August 31st, so the very end of this month. And so if we don't pass it tonight, and then we fail again to pass it at our next meeting, we will be in special meetings. And I don't want to act like Congress at like midnight trying to pass a budget. I'd just like to open it up to all of you for questions, comments, and deliberation. Ron?
First, I wanted to ask, would you entertain, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, now that you've read through that list, of just a few more points, just because I think they came up multiple times. I know it's very frustrating to be a resident, and even sometimes as a council member, and think, why are those Nimrods not doing X? And maybe I can help you by just adding a few more things that we Nimrods cannot do.
I think that's a great suggestion. And in fact, while Ronnie's reading through her list, we can go around and kind of pick up any additional questions that other council members have heard that would like to respond.
Yeah, and I do this not to advocate for one side or the other, but just so that we all ideally have the same information to start with, so we can all choose from the same pool of options that we do have. But a few people mentioned at our hearing, suggested that we approach Grand County, you know, as they'd heard that the county has a huge surplus, perhaps as much as $5 million. And so I just wanted to let you all know that I did fact check that by contacting Grand County Administrator Baird. And what I learned is the county does not have a surplus. They have a lot of unmet needs. They're going through a process to prioritize those, but the money they have will not meet all those needs. And just as a side note, might be helpful for the conversation later, and because it's tax related, I will just note that some people had asked about TRT and the ability to use that, for example, for housing. And just so you know, the county made a valiant effort to get more TRT flexibility through the legislature this past winter, and they can now use a smaller percentage of that than before for advertising, but the legislature was unwilling to let them use TRT towards housing. So sadly, that flexibility, that's flexibility the county doesn't have. And then just to remind you, the TRT money the city gets, for whatever historical reason, our portion is not restricted, so we can actually use it for different things. Just a few other things. People are always asking for clarification of how many other communities in Utah do not have a property tax, and I'll let staff correct me if I'm wrong here, but by the way I read it, it's really kind of only us, because there is Riverton City and West Haven, and then I understand Marriott Slaterville is working with West Haven, but those three don't have a conventional property tax, or maybe that's not the right word to use in the tax world, but at any rate, they're focusing on special property taxes where they're just collecting money for law enforcement services. But I guess we're the only ones who are collecting zero. Another question was, do we have the highest sales tax rate in the state? We are high, we're not the highest. I guess Park City is 9.05, we're at 8.85. And I was educated that of that 8.85 that we collect, the city of Moab only gets to keep about 2.8% of that. So if anybody wants to get real nerdy, we can get into which different line items we get to keep what of. And then, of course, the transient room tax is often treated a little bit differently because it's not applying to all the things you'd think you'd normally buy. It's more just kind of lodging. Let's see. Without getting into too much. Also, I understand everybody who is passionate and wanted to talk about being angry about hotels, but just as a reminder, in the city of Moab, we are not building new overnight accommodations, be that hotels or short-term rentals. You're actually looking at the 5 people who despite some encouragement not to do so because it would harm sales tax, we're the ones who fought to stop adding hotels to town, which we did, I think, now 2 years ago. So yes, you are still seeing construction, but that's because of under construction laws in Utah, certain projects, once they've done enough work towards their development, are considered vested, and they're allowed to continue and build. So staff can let us know how many are left on that. But just know that, longer story, but kind of did have some negative implications when we decided to not let that go on, in the sense that there were some fees we were getting by way of impact fees or affordable housing fees connected to hotel construction or overnight accommodation construction that we now have to, figure out how to pay for those things elsewhere. And let's see, I know a lot of you are interested in salaries, so I'll tell you my go-to site I go to for Utah, and it's transparentutah.gov. They changed it recently. I feel like I used to be able to look up like a whole department of a city, but it seems easiest to use now if you just enter the name of a person and then just scroll down, and it'll show you like the history of that person's municipal or elected employment, and it breaks out wages and benefits, so it's a good tool. I guess one could go on, but I will stop there.
That was helpful. Thank you, Ronnie. What are some other questions that you would all like to respond to? Kaylin?
I would like to continue with the discussion about county restricted TRT and the suggestions that somehow we work with them on that. And one thing that I've talked to city and county folks previously for the past few years is whether or not the film commission could be paid for entirely with county promotional monies. And the answer that I've gotten is yes, but it seems like there's institutional inertia around this. Mm-hmm. So I would like to float the idea that we just fund this, it's paid for jointly by the city and the county, but I'd like to float the idea that in the next fiscal year budget, that we only fund it through the end of the calendar year, which is the end of the county fiscal year, and that as a way to advance the discussion about the county paying for it in its entirety, because they seem to be willing to maximize, reserve as much TRT as possible for real community needs. So I suspect they'd be receptive. If they're not, we can reconsider with a budget amendment at that time. But I think doing so would provide a strong signal that we want to move in that direction, as well as that we're leaving no stone unturned as far as optimizing our budget.
So that is an actual amendment to the budget, a proposed amendment to the budget, separate from property tax.
Yes.
But I guess I'll just look at the council. I mean, I'm fearful that we'll go, that might devolve into like line by line. Well, what if we spend this or what if we spend? But that's actually kind of a bigger picture, and I'm curious, other council members.
And it's 150 grand total for the next fiscal year.
So it would be 75,000 we'd be cutting from our budget.
Yes, and then presuming that was successful, future years, it would be double that.
Council, that's kind of a big ball to lob. So, I mean, no need to respond right now if you don't want to, but let's just put that on the table as a consideration. How about that? But I would like to just take just another few minutes if anybody else wants to share. I heard this, but I'd really like to share this information. I heard this at the last public hearing, and I'd like to share some information.
One of the things that I heard in a phone, someone called me the day after our public hearing was, I hear that our brand new sewer plant, water reclamation facility, is now obsolete. It is not obsolete. We built it to expand. It's not at capacity. And I don't know how you stop that rumor mill. I don't know how you, somebody told me that that's not a good source. I read it on Facebook, is not a good source. If you want to know what our water reclamation facility is, call our city staff or call Public Works and ask them direct questions. That is just patently untrue. That our swimming pool was free, also patently untrue. We are still paying for it. And like other things, like other projects within the county and the city, something seems like a really great idea on its face, but operations and maintenance doesn't ever get figured into it, especially if we get that through a grant. It happened with the bike path down the river. And I'm thinking that that's probably what went on with the swimming pool, is that we didn't realize to what magnitude we'd have operations and maintenance on that facility. And I just want to share this. This is one of those aha moments. Every month, about the 7th or 8th, I get this little envelope in the mail. In my 85-year-old mother's beautiful penmanship. What she does is she writes me a note and she sends me this little check because she's on my cell phone plan. I tried everything. Mom, I don't need it. Mom, I don't want it. I just didn't cash the checks. And she would call me and say, you didn't cash the check, because she still balances her checkbook in paper. Do not argue with an 85-year-old woman. Doesn't work. So I get this check every month, and no, I don't need it. I put it in an account, and every few months I buy her something that I know she won't buy for herself. What she told me is it's not about what I want or what I need. She didn't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a burden to this community. That's why I am more than happy to pay the taxes that I will owe. I remember as a child, my grandmother lived on property that she inherited from her mother and her grandfather. The house she lived in was built in 1857 out of adobe and railroad ties. She lived in Holiday. If you know anything about Holiday, there weren't a lot of adobe and railroad ties in the 1960s and 70s in Holiday. That property now has 7 $2 million homes on it. My grandparents had apple orchards, and from the time we were old enough to hold an apple in our hand and polish it with a rag, that was how she paid her property tax. And we knew that. We didn't get to pick the peaches because we were too rough, but we could polish the apples, and we knew that that's what we were helping our grandmother do. So I have many fond memories of helping to pay property taxes sitting on a porch polishing apples.
Thanks for sharing that, Tony.
I want to add one more thing, Tony. Not only is the sewer plant not at capacity, it was well-designed with a second treatment processing plant with big circular structures where all the aeration is done, knowing that it would be expanded. So that's the next thing. I mean, that'll extend its life years down the road. But even what we have right now is not at capacity.
That's great.
That's right.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I had a horrible night's sleep last night, and I've not been sleeping well, and this is a really difficult decision. It's really hard. 30 years ago, you know, the leaders of the community decided to drop the property tax to 0%, and it was meant to incentivize business, and it was never brought back. And I had a meeting with former Mayor Dave, and who said, we just let the tourists pay for it. So for me, you know, that's been the thinking for the past 30 years. It's
I think
just,
that's what we should put on our little flags that we hang up, is just let the tourists pay for it. That seems to be our motto.
there's just a disconnect with wanting to balance quality of life and affording the infrastructure projects that we know we have in the pipeline. So I've been calling this process like throwing the spaghetti on the wall to see if it sticks. And that's just what we're doing. So I hope that, you all, I don't even get a vote on this one. But, I do hope that you all feel, safe and supported and going through this process. I know that, we've been doing a lot to listen to the community, and I'm very grateful for the community's comments and coming out. And Karen, you're right, like, it's really hard to come and speak at a public hearing, and we recognize that. So we had a proposed amendment to our actual budget. I want to ask this council if there are no other clarifying statements to be made. Did you have a clarifying
Well, I
statement?
got questions anyway before.
You would like to ask a question? Go for it.
Yeah. Well, one thing, Ben, is thank you for your little narrative that you published to us. I'm not sure the public has seen it. That does help. But I was surprised that in the list of different kinds of taxes that we collect now on the revenue side of the general fund, why didn't you just added some magic 3.3% into all the other taxes? Why did you not just simply create a line called RAP taxes, 300K, whatever it is, explicitly there, and then pass that on through to a restricted account? I mean, it would make it more transparent. I mean, I had a hard time following what you were driving at.
Yeah, so the budget narrative included changes from the tentative budget only represented the changes. So the tentative budget did have a line item for RAP tax. The problem is that the tentative budget did not allocate the restriction on those RAP tax funds. And so what was done is, we should make note that the sales tax revenue projections were very conservative. And so what we're able to do was put a moderate increase on the budgeted revenue for the other sales tax line items in order to make up for that oversight of the lack of RAP tax restriction. So if you add up all of the total sales taxes with that 3.3% increase, it totals the $320,000 that need to be restricted for the RAP tax funds.
Okay, well, thank you. That helps. That increments. Okay. And Chuck isn't here, but I wanted to ask him about, he emphasized, you showed us how we're going to use the bulk of the money that would be generated to go to capital improvement funds, road projects for the most part. And there's the bridge on 4th, the Pat Creek Bridge on 4th East, is that what we're talking about? Is now moved up on your hit list, which surprised me because I thought Cane Creek was important. But then you went on to say the reason it's moved up is because we qualify for a matching grant from the feds, but that expires pretty soon, is that right? So my only question is, I take it that bridge itself would, I always thought bridges lasted forever. They don't. So is it true that bridge, for safety reasons, has to be rebuilt from time to time? Is that correct? Why are we rebuilding the bridge?
So we do have Chuck that's available to answer this question if we want to bring him in.
Well, Chuck and Carly and I have all been working on this for about the last 2 years. We can let Chuck answer it if he's here.
He's just going to join us from the river.
Even easier.
I'm just kidding about that. I'm poking fun at his picture. He's not actually on the river. It's dark. Chuck, we can't hear you. Oh, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So the question is about the shape of the Pat Creek Bridge. Does it need replacing?
Right. It's not a complete bridge replacement. It will be a bridge widening. If you were to go out there and look, sometime in the past, there was a, after the fact, cantilevered metal sidewalk that was put on the outside of the bridge. That
Yeah, I walk down that thing all the time, yeah.
No, none of us like it, do we? Especially
and
not
it's
the
failing.
dogs.
And so if nothing else, we would have to replace that. But what we got was a grant from UDOT for active transportation that will allow us to widen the bridge so we can have bicycle lanes, because if you go out there now, there's not enough room for 2 travel lanes plus bicycle lanes, and it would replace, we put on standard sidewalks on the bridge. So the grant money plus our money will give us a widened bridge with bicycle lanes continuous on 400 East, as well as the new sidewalk, and replace that failing sidewalk that's hanging off the edge of the bridge.
Okay, that helps, Chuck. Yeah, you have talked about that now that you mentioned it, so thank you guys for reminding me. And I have one other further comment on the whole situation, if I may, and then I'm done.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is, for the 3 years or so that I've been sitting on this council, we've heard an endless stream of complaints about hotels, too many hotels. I am so sick of hotels. If I've never seen another hotel again, that would be fine with me. Well, guess what, kids? There are no more hotels right now. We've taken hotels out of the commercial zones, and with it has gone substantial and successful fees, taxes, if you will, that are assessed to those hotels that has helped significantly augment our affordable housing fund. There's no hotels in the pipeline anymore. I guess there may be 2 or 3 that are still being built, but there's nothing beyond that, and not least until we reinstate hotels, if and when we do. Okay, so now when we're talking about an income tax, everybody's hollering bloody murder. Why don't visitors pay the fees? Well, so we have a choice as residents in the town. I've been talking about this from time to time. You can either cut back on the visitor aspect of your experiences here in town and look more like a typical Utah town in which property owners really do pay the bills, kids. Or you can elect to continue to grow the tourist industry, more hotels and so forth, which will certainly help with paying the bill. We've enjoyed a free ride now for the last 30 years. And so I'm not advocating, particularly at one point or the other, hotels or no hotels and so forth. But the point is, I want all of you to be sure you realize that there's a trade to be made here. You can't have them both. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. So whatever decision we end up coming at, whatever level we set, which could be 0, may not be, may be full board. I don't know what we're going to do. But there will be that trade to be made no matter we do what. If we do elect to do with a smaller level, which is frankly the leap ahead is what I have in mind, it means that we'll have to ask for further truth and taxation hearings from time to time and before too long. So I do agree that the timing is bad for a variety of reasons, and so for that reason, looking ahead here, I'm a little reluctant to assess a big amount like we've been discussing. But doesn't mean that the need's not out there. So we can lessen the burden now, but
Well,
property taxes are coming, folks.
that is, you are the first of this council to kind of put out there where you are sitting in terms of if and how much. So what I just heard from you is yes, and at a lower amount than what has been of the cap amount. Is that correct?
Well, we're going to talk about it here in a minute, and I haven't stated exactly where I'm at right now.
Okay.
But we're about to.
Okay.
Or maybe
well, I'm going to try to tease it out of all of you.
Or maybe in 2 weeks. So we've still got a little bit of time. Yeah. And I would really like, we heard endless complaints about lack of transparency, and Ben has busted his little bippy trying to keep all the schedules up to date and so forth, and it's like swatting moles, okay? I mean, there's always something that needs to be fixed. So I appreciate his work, but if we defer the decision tonight, then it gives the public another 2 weeks to digest what's going on and come to terms with where we may go. That's all I'm trying to say. So
thank you, Mike.
Can I ask a process question?
Yes.
So this motion before us is a combination, right, of moving the budget forward, but also deciding on and this is where I always use the wrong words with the property tax, but whatever, a mill levy or whatever, the words are, a percentage. So part of my question is, I don't know if I'm the only one. I have a bunch of line item questions on the budget, and I probably get more detailed and have more questions than the rest of you, but I didn't know if the rest of you had questions. So more time would benefit me, the opportunity to sit down with Ben and ask some questions. And sorry, Ben, if I kind of missed something you and Mike were talking about. Were you explaining how you guys derived the perceived amount of RAP taxes that we might get? Like, one of the things that confused me is if our actual for the first quarter was 46,000, why do we think we're going to have 320,000 in 4 quarters? Yeah.
It's just like our regular season, so the actual for the months aren't created the same. Some months are busier than others, and so sales will be up in some and down in others.
Gotcha.
We took the percentage that we approved of the RAT tax through the election, and then we used our actual dollar figures from years past, if that had been applied to get to that number. So that's how we generated that number. But that's why, some months it's going to be closer to 100,000, and one month it's going to be closer to 50,000, because January is going to have far less sales tax than May.
Okay. I mean, do you guys feel like that what we have collected is April through June, I guess, or
yep.
is
And
it
so
through? Yeah.
This is also why in the budget we didn't allocate it towards anything, and we've been recommending the whole time that we wait until next budget cycle to actually put that committee together and start spending it. Right now, it's kind of just sitting in the RAP, or excuse me, in the department.
Yeah, I guess what worried me is if they're, when I just looked at it and I multiplied it by 4, I was like, oh, that's like 180 or 190. So I didn't know if we had to come in lower. But if you guys feel like that's, a relatively quiet period comparatively.
It's a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
And that's hence the reason why we were like, we're not allocating it. We're not setting up this committee. We're going to wait. And then as we get it, because as we get into January next year, we should have 3 quarters worth. As we get into March, April, May, as we get into the full budget cycle, you should have 4 full quarters, and we should have a really good idea of what you're actually budgeting into next year, and how much you want to give to the committee to give out, how much you want to put into projects that could be built at the park, and how much you actually want to put into departments that meet the criteria. So our advice at this point is to just keep collecting it for a year and see what you have.
Okay. I mean, I can go through some of my bigger questions now, but I guess part of what I'm trying to figure out is if other people need more time, then, I can just arrange a time to sit down with Ben, or if a bunch of people had questions, I could go through a longer meeting with Ben, but
Ben, what would be helpful for you?
I think it's extremely important, even if there are line item adjustments like Kaylin had suggested, that be discussed with the group so that there's at least some form of consensus. In the public hearing, there were a number of things discussed that could be proposed as changes. So these 5 scenarios were built using the presentation that was done back in June. That doesn't mean that we have to hold to those 3 priorities.
And I think that's worth mentioning too, is that we have, as a council, had access to this budget for quite a long time, that we did have the proposal back where we did approve the tentative budget. But we need to make sure that we give space for line item changes to expenses as much as we're giving the attention to the, tax increase, potential tax increase as well. So
I would be fine if we moved this to the next meeting. I think it will give Ronnie some time to visit with Ben and to get those questions answered that she has on her personal level. And I don't know, Kaylin, if your idea with the county can come into any kind of cohesive form in 2 weeks, but it would be interesting to see if we could at least get a conversation going.
I think that's a good point. I've had 3 separate conversations with Chris about similar topics with that I could share with you.
So rather than, going through this line by line tonight, maybe moving it down the road 2 weeks gives everybody a chance to digest it a little bit better, and
So your
think of
option
some-
is to table.
Well,
motion to table.
before we, can I?
Uh-huh.
So there's, a lot of the propositions that have been thrown out for this property tax has been based on a rainy day fund, increasing our police force, and critical projects. And coming back to, and I need to state it publicly because I'm really concerned about the optics of it. There's 8 critical infrastructure projects that supposedly are critical. My road that I have lived on for 15 years is on that critical list. I have never seen it before. I don't know why all of a sudden Pear Tree Lane is a critical project. Unless there's something I don't know about the road, it's really, I find that I don't even think we know what we are signing off on. And especially after the public hearing, people cannot get behind rainy day surplus at 35% or 27%. I've had discussions with Ben, and he feels like, that's the temperature. We haven't given him that input. I don't know. He's kind of flying blind, and do we need 25 to 30 police officers? we need to get our house in check, and I do not feel like we are doing that. And I am not, fundamentally, I'm not opposed to a property tax, but to ignore the fact that half of the children in the school district are on free and reduced lunch. And here, I am going to say it, I am a privileged middle-aged white woman, and I can pay the tax. It's serious in our community that people are desperate, and to say that, you can get off on paying taxes if you have a need. But what happens, Mayor, is that when you aren't collecting that as a group, that burden becomes higher on everybody else. And I don't want to ignore the implications of people not being able to pay the tax, because it's a real thing, and that means that we are going to be paying more individually. We are just getting out of COVID. Right now we're back in mask again because we're dealing with a Delta variant. We are going to go right back into, after we pass our budget, we're going to start talking about sewer rate increases, and we have to go back and we have to talk about water rate increases again, because we have committed to 5 years of increases for water rates. So, to ignore what our constituents are saying, and under our leadership right now, I am not confident that I can go forward with a property tax. So, that's where I'm at. And I still have a ton of questions about the budget that I know, and forgive me because I take full responsibility. We've had this for quite a while, but even in the last couple of weeks, it's changing, and I still have a ton of questions. I'd be open for a workshop, but I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
I do have additional line item questions, so it doesn't seem like we're going to get through it tonight. So it just depends on how much time we want to spend on it now versus workshop it.
Well, I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly, Karen. So just real concern about the budget that's proposed and leadership is what you said?
Yeah. I feel like we are lacking vision and like a strategic plan. And I have rewatched all of our meetings in the last couple of months. We've talked about using a property tax for sustainability. We've talked about using property tax for transit. We've talked about using property tax for beefing up the planning department. And then it was like, well, what's going to stick? Well, we can maybe throw it on infrastructure. And I'm for that, and I believe that does need to happen. But we need to be really clear what it is that we are that we are paying for, and I do not feel like we are being clear.
I wonder if that's because, like, as you were just going through that list, what we're seeing is that there's a laundry list of things that are in need of funding. And so I know that when we were first talking about the property tax, it was like, man, we just keep getting hit over and over again at these meetings about needing to address fiscal responsibility that we have as the city and not having the funding to be able to do it. And so, to really address all of the needs that we have, the needs moving forward and the laundry list of infrastructure needs from yesterday. So I get that. I get that it feels like a moving target for us as a council, for us as a community, and the question of what we're going to spend it on. It's like, with a price tag like a $60 million revenue, or $60 million project list, it's like, well, there's that too. I do appreciate your comments in sharing that, that observation that we have kind of gone back and forth. And the history of the talking about property tax, I think this community's been talking about property tax since before I ran for mayor, which was 4 years ago. We've been talking about, like, why don't we just implement a property tax? It doesn't make sense. Moab City just doesn't have the revenue that other cities does to be able to pay for stuff, critical stuff.
Yeah, and I apologize, I really appreciate that, but just when, trying to get money for the school district, I mean, they got really clear about what it was that they were asking the residents to pay for. And even people who were resistant to paying a property tax,
yeah,
you could get behind it if you knew what the heck it was that you were really paying for.
Well, and I think that things also, when we were all 4 years ago talking about property tax, 4+ years, talking property tax, having gone through a pandemic, I think we were like, okay, well, there are bills that we have to pay that are also critical bills that if tourism goes away, we still have bills that need to be made, right? And need to be paid. And so for me, it was like a reality check. Okay, maybe tourism will never go away. Maybe we always want to be beholden to tourism and that we're okay to let the tourists continue to pay. But I do think that, now is, it's yet another year, 30 years later, and we're considering it because it's been considered for a while and it just hasn't hit the dais. But for me, the reason why it's very important for us to talk about it now is because having gone through a pandemic, we do see the fragility of the revenue stream for the city of Moab.
But
right? There's fragility.
Yes, but when you say that, it's almost as if everyone else did not hit that same. I mean, you showed a graph and it was like, oh, we have this bump, but guess what? Everybody hit that, and not everyone got COVID funding or ARPA funding or PPP. I mean, so it's really.
You said you wanted to help get our house in order.
Yes, I do. I really do.
So this is why it's of consideration, right?
Yes, but it's a slippery slope to say that, we are lacking funds when the community all were lacking funds at the same time.
Right, but we are the community. I mean, the services that we're talking about are community services, our ability to distribute water safely to the residents.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So, I mean, I'm not like,
no, you're right.
It's really important to, we're talking about taking care of our community with the funding that, if we collect a property tax, it's not like we're going to Vegas.
No,
we're taking care of our community. We're making sure that we have clean, fresh water distributed to the homes and businesses in our community. We're making sure that sewer flows freely and gets treated responsibly, that we're never again fined for waste going into the river. You know, like we've got, that we can get around town on our roads. I just, like, it's always surprising to me when there's this us and them. Like we are just all residents of this community that are sitting here at this table. And it just, I don't understand
no,
that.
that's great you say that, but, and then in the pamphlet at the public hearing, I mean, the us and them, I don't know who put out the pamphlet, but there was a second homeowners and nightly rentals and businesses are getting a free ride. Like, what kind of divisive communication are we trying to say? So that you talk about the us and them, that was really inappropriate. We're at a time right now, and everyone has said this, we need to be creating community and not division. And I'm concerned that this property tax is, like, how it's been portrayed is that those others are not paying, and I that's really unfair.
And I wish that not passing this property tax would solve for community division. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be great.
That would be great.
That would be great. But and no,
But
that's
our
a good
community
point.
division is so much deeper than $12 extra a month, right?
And then to go back to clean water and sewer, those are done through enterprise funds, and so that is working, that is functioning, and this money is not going to be going into
For the
those.
salaries of the people, we're talking about salaries, we're like getting hit with, oh my gosh, the salaries, those are the people that are managing the enterprise funds, that are managing those facilities. I mean, I hear you, Karen. This is not an easy decision, and especially right now coming out of the pandemic. And it does have a greater impact if Grand County is assessing, for sure. Reassessing. It is not an easy
So Mayor, if I
decision.
may, as long as Karen spilled the beans here on where she stands, I was going to wait till next 2 weeks from now to say more, but I will say that what I'm focusing on, what I told social media was been numbered them 1 through 5, where 1 is no tax, no new tax, 1 was a $1 million level, or 2 was a $1 million level. That's my favorite level, all right, because it gets some extra money for the funds, for capital improvement funds, and does some things that we do need to do. And I do think that property taxes are going to be a fixture of life here, but what I've told people is that I want the levels set low enough so that they're small compared to county property taxes. And the 3.3 million level certainly does not qualify, in my opinion, okay? So the 1.0 million level is my favorite thing. I could conceivably be talked into 1.5, and I could also be talked into none at all. I can see Karen's point for that too. She's right about there's more. Because if you just read between the tea leaves, a lot of people are saying the same thing all the way across the political spectrum. And for us just to blithely ignore them saying, oh, the city needs the money to do the services that you deserve, is not going to cut it. I think we need to listen more clearly to what they're saying. And, you know, they may push us into doing things that may turn out to be not in the best interest of their own of our residents in the long run, but still, if that's what they want to do, that's what I would do.
Ronnie?
I got a few things to say. So first of all, as a lot of you probably know, property tax is kind of new to some of us. I want to thank the staff at Grand County who helped kind of explain to me what the 5 roles played over there are, just in terms of everything from figuring out who owns the properties to actually doing the assessment and collecting the money, which gave me a good background to some basic questions. And then I want to thank Ben and Joel and the other staff here for helping me understand some of the aspects of this. So let me say a few things. First of all, I would take personal responsibility for not being totally on top of the budget. As many of you know, my dad died a year and a half ago. My mom's been trying to decide what to do. She sold the family home. They've been in 50 years, moved to a senior apartment, broke her hip pretty soon thereafter. So I've been doing several trips to help her. And that has slowed me down in terms of, and so my attitude was, there are 4 other council members, and we're not voting on it yet, so I'm behind, but I will catch up. So I do feel like life circumstances happen, and I hope that if any of you are ever up here in this position and your family needs you, you too will put them first. So just so you know, I have been looking in detail. I want to thank the staff here for explaining to me from the beginning, and I want to thank, I should go back to Rachel Stenta, because I think as the first finance director, she kind of sat us down and gave us a good explanation about some basic finance and bonding and some of the advantages of having a property tax, in the sense that it can allow you to qualify for certain bonds with better rates. And as we look forward to dealing with bigger infrastructure projects, bonding, at least in my understanding, is one thing that you're told can be very helpful in that regard. So better rates have an appeal, but that doesn't mean you need a property tax of 100%. I'm guessing, I don't know how low you can go. You guys can tell me. 0.5%? I don't know. But I think, yeah, you need something on the book. But that said, we kind of talked from the beginning that, and some of us are on record saying, we want to learn more, and let's go through the process and learn more. But I think somewhere along the way, a little bit of that got lost. So I take responsibility for not communicating that better of what I was trying to do. And staff had said to me, well, you and the community need to understand the property tax is an option, and there are good reasons for doing it, but there are also challenges that come with it. So the main thing the community should understand is, what services or needs do you want met, and based on those, we'll tell you if we can deliver on those with what we have right now, or if we have to search further. I mean, the $65 million in infrastructure is kind of a different thing. We all have to deal with that. So I've kind of been told that if you were playing with your Legos and you were building a new town from scratch, the best way to build it to keep up with your expenses is to have a property tax and a sales tax. And then ideally, if you have a perfect capitalistic bubble, those taxes will go up incrementally to keep up with inflation every year, and everybody's income stream will also do that so they can have the ability to pay. But of course, we all know it doesn't work that way. So this has been a good learning lesson, but I will tell you for me personally that at least for my part, and again, I admit I have been a little bit focused on family, I realize how much I have to learn, and I don't feel like I know enough yet to make the best choice for you. I do think there's benefits to property tax in Moab's future, but I don't feel educated enough to feel like I am ready yet to choose one of these numbers for you. So unless something changes for me in the next 2 weeks, I will probably be voting against putting a property tax in place at this time, because I feel, if you watch me at meetings, I'm a big process geek, and that could be a real pain in the butt. But at the same time, I feel like from past community organizing work and just grassroots work that all of these outcomes are better if we do it together, and we're not all going to sit here and have tea parties over property tax and sing Kumbaya. But at the same time, there is real benefit to saying, let's all learn about this as a tool, and let's look at the other challenges we have as a community to keep living in Moab, because a lot of us may not be able to stay here. A lot of us are freaking out, frankly, between, the gap in wages not keeping up with housing prices, other things driving up housing prices. We in the city all get reassessed on our property tax next year, and that is something required by the state. But if you talk to people in the other sections of the county who are being reassessed, we all know there will be some shock with that. Karen mentioned sewer and water funds, and I think we could help each other more as a community if we spent some time discussing all of the added costs that are coming at us, and also the tools that we have to address the infrastructure, because I will totally own this. I ran on wanting to look out for your infrastructure and improve some of the old and aging infrastructure, and I feel really responsible for that. So I do feel there's a role for replacing more than we're doing every year. I know we're not keeping up like much of America, so I feel a strong responsibility to delivering more of that to you, but I also feel like you guys need to be, we need to give you at least a little bit more time to be part of the wave of that conversation. And there's probably more to say, but I'll stop there for now.
Thanks for sharing those comments, Ronnie.
Mayor, would you entertain a motion to table this until next meeting?
Well, unless, I would entertain it, but I just want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. Kaylin, I don't know if you have anything that you want to share at this time?
No, I was about to make a similar motion.
Okay, well then I will entertain.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of tabling this agenda item, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Mayor,
Yes.
we just had a small thing that's going on that Carly and I are dealing with. That's why we've been kind of going in and out. I just wanted to apologize for the distraction. Didn't want you to think we were being disrespectful to the discussion that was taking place. That's not what was happening. We're just, as we come in this chamber, the city keeps going. It doesn't stop because we all walk in here and just got an issue that we're trying to deal with. So I apologize for us both being up and going out and being on the phone.
I appreciate that comment. Thanks for sharing that. I think you're all doing a really great job, and I'm very grateful for the effort that you've put to entertain the request of this council to put forward information for us to decide whether or not we want to move forward with the property tax.
We're happy to do it. We're happy to continue to meet with you guys and provide you whatever information you need. And ultimately, it's a decision you guys get to make. And ultimately, it's a decision you guys will decide if you do pass one, how it is spent and where it is spent. So those priorities are you guys' and we will fully support whatever you decided.
Okay, so we're going to move forward with agenda item 9.2, continued discussion on employee housing short-term work plan. Caitlin, welcome.
Thank you.
And I do know that we were going to have Nora join on the line.
And I'm going to be sitting here, but Nora's going to be leading this, so.
Okay, and Nora, we see you.
Okay, good.
And
right.
Do you see us, or are you just?
No, but that's okay. I've been warned that I wouldn't be able to. So
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, Nora, welcome. Caitlin, welcome.
Okay. So, last 2 weeks ago, we talked about a document that Kayla and I put together that kind of just threw out ideas about potential solutions this is really weird, potential solutions for our employee workforce housing needs in particular, and also looking kind of a little bit more long-term, just in affordability in general for housing. And we gave each council member an opportunity to tell us what they liked and what they didn't like. And so we summarized what we thought we heard. And this is Exhibit A. Well, let me share. Can you see that?
Yes.
Wait, is that the right one?
Yes.
No, this is the second one. I apologize. I have them both up, so. Now I lost. Oh, here we go. Try again. There we go. There we go. Can everybody see this?
Yes, we can. Although it is little, but yes, we can.
Well, yeah, I can make it bigger. I just wanted.
And Summer, just a point of question, is on YouTube, they're seeing what we're seeing on the screen? Thank you.
Okay. And I will make it bigger, but I just wanted to kind of show you in the big picture what we did to this matrix. So what we did is we left the first part pretty much alone. And then we added the time frame a little bit. And then we tried to summarize what council direction was in column H. And then put a priority on them based upon the input from the council. So, what I might do is hide some of these fields so that we can make this bigger and you can still see things.
Well, and council, were you able to kind of negotiate and be able to match the project policy, project/policy with the rating? Were there any glaring misrepresentations in the documents that Nora presented to us?
No, the only one question I had is the cooperation between businesses and Walnut Lane. It looked like that was there wasn't support for that, or it was very low on that. Is there a reason for that?
So I'm looking at this, I eliminated some fields so that we can see it bigger. So what specifically are you talking about?
Well, it just said that it may be complicated to develop a program and administer. I mean, having the fact that there's so many local businesses that are in need of housing, and it just says that it's not a top priority and it's difficult to administer. I'm just wondering if we can get creative with Walnut Lane and get more partners. I don't know if that's, because I mean, there's no question that housing for employees is an issue, so.
We can certainly try that. We would need, certainly you would be a great liaison with the business community, and we also have some contacts. So we could try to do that and see if there's any kind of an interest, and then kind of go from there. What we heard was that it may not be practical, and that we didn't have an overwhelmingly positive response on it. So that's the conclusion we came up to, but if you guys feel differently, that's absolutely fine. So did all of you take a look at our comments and the council direction, and did you agree with most of those except the last one?
Yeah, so Mayor, may I address Nora? I got
Yes, absolutely.
right up the top. Well, I love it all. First of all, when I posted your long list on social media, I got all kinds of raves like, wow, this is awesome. So thank you, Nora. RVs is temporary emergency housing. You wrote RVs to be parked off-street would be seasonal. And my question for you is, why seasonal? Why wouldn't, if we elect to do RVs, why not year-round?
Well, that's something that's certainly up for discussion. I think there are a lot of people that wanted to solve maybe this year and next year's problem, and the hope is in the third year that we might have some apartments actually built, like Walnut Lane and some others that are in the works. So I'm not sure that the general residential population of Moab necessarily supports a permanent allowance for RVs and or tents on residential lots. But if you guys feel we could do it as a short-term measure, or we could do it as a long-term measure and just rescind it if we decide in the future that we don't need that anymore. So they're really two different approaches. And I guess I am asking back at the council which approach you are thinking at this point in time. The other thing we could do is I could bring you, this is an item that the Planning Commission can certainly take a look at, but probably this is an ordinance that the council would have to amend. Planning Commission would likely make a recommendation on it. And we could give you our ideas, kind of consolidating Uray and Crescent View. And then you guys can talk about whether you want that short-term or long-term. So this is something that we heard that you wanted us to start to look into.
But Nora, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Mike, did you mean just why are we doing it seasonal, like for 3 months instead of like a year round, but are you still thinking short term in terms of, I mean, not like we're going to allow RV and tent camping for the next 10 years. Did you mean it like, or I don't know, I don't know.
I was thinking more in terms of how you might have an RV parked out there for 2 or 3 years. I mean, winter and summer is what I was thinking. That'd be a nice thing, you know. That's what I thought.
And that it would be for long-term and not short-term?
Yeah.
That it would be in a residential zone and it would be
I don't know how long
long-term.
along we can get away with, but that's how Moab got started, folks. I mean, it was.
That's how I moved here, but that's a long time ago.
Hey, the other thing, Nora, while I got you the floor, I like the idea of camping tents. Seems to me that would probably be seasonal. You could swing it in the wintertime. I used to do a lot of winter camping when I was younger, but it's cold, baby. And so you might, if you want to consider that, I would break it out as a separate line item because it would probably be different conditions than RVs, which are better insulated.
Okay.
Yeah, it does seem like it's two different categories. One is an RV slip in somebody's yard versus a RV style development that allows for long-term car camping and van life.
Yeah.
So I think it might need to get broken out, but I think both are high priorities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nora, this is Ronnie. I just wanted to clarify, I wasn't sure. The first item, the ADU changes, the amending the reductions in setbacks and building height. I just couldn't remember, was the suggestion just to do this generally or only as something to help people who are providing houses to primary residents?
Well, that's one of the things we're going to talk about.
Okay.
The Planning Commission hasn't yet made a recommendation. I've noticed this for a public hearing, and I'll be drafting the ordinance for their meeting on the 24th. And we'll see what kind of recommendations they come up with. And one of the questions that will be asked is this just for full-time residents that they would rent on a monthly basis to a local, or can it be a rental property that then also has a second, a long-term rental property that also has a long-term rental ADU? So those will be two options that we'll talk about with the Planning Commission.
Thanks. And just in general, I know last time I spent some time talking about enforcement. Are we just thinking that across the board enforcement is going to be discussed kind of with each one where that applies, or is it concerned?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think certainly enforcement on RVs in people's driveway, especially if you allow them year-round, is going to be very difficult to make sure that they're monthly renters. So that's a consideration when we start talking about that one, yes. But we will try to give you an idea of how it impacts our existing city staff.
Okay, thanks. And then, sorry if I missed it, but was the idea that Planning Commission would start working on the ones that had the highest rating, or kind of the ones and the twos, just so I have some idea of kind of how it's moving forward?
Yes.
Okay, so stuff kind of 3 and down the line is probably for later thought processes.
Well, ARPA, who knows what's going on with that? The pad is something that we could certainly move forward with. I think Caitlin has some time to work on that. R3 density is something that I want to start talking about because I think this is going to take, I think it will take a long time for people to understand what the approach is, and I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion on it, which I think we need to be able to take the time to do that, and it may take a long time. So I'm saying it's a high priority, and we could certainly start there. Or start with that. Short-term parking in an RV park in the C4, probably a little bit less realistic as we move forward in time. We are having folks that own property in the C4 start to approach us to talk about other kinds of uses besides overnight accommodations. So there are property owners that are holding out for the C4 to allow overnight accommodations in the future. There are others who want to move forward with it just being commercially zoned. So I don't know if that's something that we will talk about too much, but let me see. So yeah, the medium priorities are where they really get into, well, allowing bunk houses and dormitories is a really easy fix. So I think that we could, if we're doing other things, we could probably throw that in. Amending parking requirements for employee housing. So some of them, you know, as we're making changes to the pad, we might address parking.
Well, can I also comment on the fact that the amend pad and allow it in the R2 zone as the potential project or policy, but that what came out of that conversation was actually the idea of just doing a slightly higher density in R2, and I don't know if that needs to be intertwined in pad, or if that can be something that we would have as a separate policy, because that's super juicy, low-hanging fruit. If we were able to say, you know, a 3-plex or a 4-plex, and so I think that was something that everybody on the council seemed to be very in favor of, and a very easy thing to run through Planning Commission for consideration. So it would be allowing up to 3 or perhaps 4 units in the R2, as opposed to revising pad. So.
Okay.
And I'll just go on the record saying I haven't digested that, so I'm not sure I support that, but it seems like the majority do, so it's worth looking into. Same with the zones currently listed under the bunkhouses and dormitories. I got some input on that, so.
Well, you can put both of them on the laundry list. Yeah. I mean, pad for R2, we can talk about it and then put just more.
Well, and not all policies are gonna be favorable to all people.
Is Nora still with us?
I am.
I think she stopped sharing her screen. Is that what happened?
Oh, I thought I just reshared it. I didn't?
No, it's her desktop screen.
Delicate Arch?
No.
The thing we see?
It's back.
Oh, okay. Well, so council, is there any other changes or revisions that you'd want to make to the matrix?
Well, I'd just like to follow up on the R2 issue. I feel like considering density, there's a continuum across R2, R3, and R4, and including the PUD as a tool as well as PAD. And so I realize that dealing with them all might make it more complicated, but I feel like it might offer the best solution to deal with them as an integrated whole with a range of densities, including possibly increasing density in R2 if it's tied to primary residence.
So, right, that makes sense. So the request would be for the Planning Commission to, when looking at higher density for the R2, to look at 3 or 4 units, that it be tied to the primary residence.
Yeah.
So can you see this other Excel?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so this is kind of the first sheet digested a little bit, and what we did is we did make some changes. This, like, simplify the deed restriction for local residents. We added a section that talks about consider allowing, well, 4 stories, but I thought I'd put one in here about allowing triplex and fourplex configuration in the R2. There it is. Allow 2 household and 3 household configurations. So I did change this list up a little bit to kind of give it a little more definition. But I agree in terms of the big picture density thing, it's best to look at them all together. But I think in addition to that, whether we decide to mess with densities or not, we should give more flexibility to unit type in the R2. So that's now a separate line item.
Okay, so any other comments about this matrix before it gets taken to the Planning Commission? Comments, questions? Excellent. Thank you, Nora, for putting this together. Thank you, Caitlin, for working collaboratively together on this list. And I am hopeful that it will move forward with the Planning Commission. And so please do let me know if there are, immediately, if there becomes a vacancy or we have an attendance issue. Because we are very excited to see the Planning Commission move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission is working really well together. So and I think they look forward to this. I'm talking to them about this in work session at their meeting on Thursday.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nora. Thanks, Caitlin. We'll move on to our new business, 10.1, proposed resolution 27-2021, a resolution approving the lot line adjustment of property located at 54 North, 300 East, and 68 North, 300 East. Briefing and possible action. We did have a question about if the two parties agreed to the petition, and they do, Ronnie. So if there's any other questions, I would entertain questions or a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that the Moab City Council approve Moab City Resolution 27-2021, a resolution approving the lot line adjustment of property located at 54 North, 300 East, and 68 North, 300 East, Moab, Utah 84532.
Thanks, Ronnie. Is there a second?
I will second.
Oh, I'll take that from Mike. Thanks, Mike. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. And 10.2, possible approval of a federal aid agreement for a local agency project with UDOT for design and construction of a roundabout at the intersection of 400 North and 100 West. So we do have Chuck waiting, eddied out, waiting on the river for us to get to his last but not least agenda item. And I did discuss with Chuck that for our meeting tonight, that he bring up the design. Now, of course, this is not the final design, but this is a conceptual design of the roundabout so that we're all very clear with what we're considering moving forward with UDOT. We've been talking about it for a really long time with the cost share of this intersection. So Chuck, once we see your what's it called, thumbnail picture. I can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening again. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we do see. Yes, thank you.
So before I show you a concept design, I just wanted to take a quick second. I know it's getting late, but the reason this intersection is such a good candidate from a traffic engineering standpoint is because it's an offset intersection. You can see that 100 West does not line up with Emma Boulevard, which is here, and the right-of-way on 400 North gets truncated over on the east side of the intersection. So we go from about 90 feet of right-of-way here to about 50 feet of right-of-way. So the distances are different. It doesn't line up geometrically the way that intersections typically do. And of course, this is our shared use path that comes down, and then through the park, the shared use path, which is also a way for kids to get to school, as well as for recreational users of the path. So, from a traffic engineering standpoint, what it does is the roundabout will help slow traffic down, improve pedestrian safety, and I'll show you an exhibit, another exhibit, and I don't know how to do it except to stop it and start it again. I'm sorry. Someday I'll learn how to do that. Now can you see the concept design there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So this is what we were looking at a moment ago on Google Earth. Again, I want to emphasize this is concept. This was just put together as an exhibit so that we could visualize it. One of the things about, there were some questions about how does it improve pedestrian safety. Well, it moves the pedestrian crossing further away from the flow of traffic. And these two gray zones are median barriers. So pedestrians moving from the south side of the street only have to worry about vehicles coming in from this direction. Then there's a pedestrian refuge here. And if you elect as a pedestrian to wait for a vehicle to clear here, you only have to be looking to the right. You don't have to be looking to the left, whereas if you cross from here to there, now you're looking across the whole expanse. Another treatment we will look at will be consider making this a raised table. And then another treatment we'll look at is called an RRFB, which is a pedestrian actuated flashing light to alert motorists. And there's several places in town that I'd like to recommend to council that we do that. You know, Cane Creek, 400 East, and if we move forward with this, this allows UDOT to install them with mainly their money so that we can see if we like them as a community. They're used in lots of communities throughout the region, and I think that'll be a positive. It slows traffic down. This will be posted at 15 miles per hour, and it's actually environmentally better because it reduces emissions because the stopped and idling condition goes away. Vehicles are able to move through the intersection. And this would be designed so that large vehicles, like I said in the agenda summary, school buses, which use this intersection, shuttle companies for bikes and rafting use it as well, and this would be designed for that. So with that overview, I'd be happy to, and these are our traffic counts real quick, I'm sorry. You know, we have 2,000 vehicles per day here, and we've done traffic counts here. There's in the peak hour, so daily count is over a 24-hour period, measured over 6 days. The vehicle peaks is we actually will stand out there and do traffic counts for peak, what's called a peak hour. And here there's 316 vehicles in the peak hour, or 5 vehicles a minute, essentially what that is. So there are traffic considerations with pedestrians crossing here, and this is, we believe, and in fact, the FHWA has done studies that show that there can be a reduction in pedestrian accidents of about 80% by using roundabouts in certain locations. So, if council approves it tonight, our cost share is like 6.7%. The rest of the money would be used by UDOT from federal dollars that come back to the state and the Center for Local Government for use on collector roads, and these are those collector roads. You recall our functional classification. And UDOT will administer the project. We'll be involved as co-project managers. There's a public involvement program. There will be right-of-way acquisition if needed. There'll be tree replacement if needed. It'll be comply with city and state ordinances. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Chuck, this is Ronnie. Can you just put your cursor where a bicycle would go? Only because when we worked on 100 West, it seemed so much of the messaging was like, you're going to just go down 100 West, you're going to cut over to Emma. And so now I'm thinking, sorry, I'm having a dyslexic moment yeah. Anyway, could you just show me where a bike going north on 100 West would go?
North on 100 West? Sure. We have two choices. In Roundabout, you have a choice of letting the bicycle go in the travel lane like it does on a normal street through here, and then move around, or you put in a ramp, what they call them, a bicycle ramp. So as an example right here, here's the bike lane currently. We would put in a bicycle lane through here, getting them out of the travel lane, and then they would come back out here and have a choice of stopping and getting and walking their bike across the street at the pedestrian crossing right here, or entering into the travel lane again. So it's two techniques of, as design moves on, we evaluate whether we use the ramp, which is what I suspect. It's called a ramp. It's not really up. It's a dedicated path through there. Can I answer your question, Ryan?
Yeah, now I have a less fun devil's advocate one. The community is asking us to cut costs, and I can't remember if you were here already the last time we reworked this intersection, but when some of those white lines went in and some of the little corner got cut off. So I can imagine to some people it might look like, what the heck are you people doing? You can't make up your mind what you want to do here. So do you remember what the logic was for those lines? And I don't know what any kind of accident data shows, but there are probably some people at this point who would say, well, it's great we have this UDOT money, but is this where we should be putting 80 grand? So I guess that's my question.
Chuck, I do have a question. The funny looking curb on the east side, does that reflect property lines that are trying to get fixed or something?
No, that's a curb line.
Yeah.
Again, the thing with the roundabout is you narrow it. It's really a traffic calming device as well. I mean, it's a pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, and it's a traffic calming device as well. So this will be a curb line, whether it's right here, whether it's over here. This is concept design. Did I answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, and then a related question. It looks like we're going to lose the northeast corner of the park, Swanee Park itself. People are going to be driving through what's now shaded in green. Is that right?
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's probably the one sycamore tree there would have to go, but I don't know if council knows this, but I think you may, but we have a tree replacement policy in our city code whereby we replace, we take the diameter of this tree and we're committed to replacing that many trees with and we would use as larger trees as we can. We've met with Annie at the park, and we talked about the tree issue, and that'll be part of the program is to replace trees, and we'll get more trees to replace them with.
Okie dokie.
This isn't the exact location. Again, it's concept design, but it would need to go through there. You're right. At some level.
Okie dokie, thank you.
Chuck, this is Kalen. So as I read this, it appears that we're converting what's kind of a bad four-way intersection into two three-way intersections, one of which has a roundabout. Is that correct?
I think that's one way to look at it.
And the way this is drawn, it looks like on the eastern exit from the roundabout that the sort of that pedestrian island would block a left turn for a vehicle trying to enter Emma from 100 West. Is that the intention? Or
No, it's not the intention. It's just not final design.
Okay.
Here, if I'm driving up here and I want to go left on Emma, I think there's actually, even under this design, you could make it right there, but no, that would be part of the design. This pedestrian refuge doesn't have to be this long right here. That, it could maybe be pulled back 5 feet, making room for that left turn movement right there. But that's what.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Chuck, for showing the concept. And council, do you have any further questions for him? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
I just have one last one, Chuck. So you put in here that we're obligated to cover any overruns or ineligible costs to UDOT. I mean, what's the likelihood that that might happen?
Pretty low. Actually, the other thing I put in there is that what that means is if we went halfway through the project, halfway through construction and changed our mind, we'd be responsible for those costs. But the other thing is, with construction costs the way they are, what we have the ability to do is go back for more money to pay for construction. I think I put in the agenda summary. There's already been a dedicated $400,000 at the Joint Highway Committee that's available with UDOT project manager signing off on it. They just don't want to commit now that we have the construction final documents and go out with the bid process. So I think it's very unlikely to answer your question directly that we go over and except if we back out of the agreement later.
Gotcha, thanks.
One thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, Chuck, but this does solve for the, what did you call it at the last meeting? The blunder?
Bunsen's blunder.
Bunsen's blunder.
Oh, I would be so excited if we could get rid of that.
It would.
Clunky thing.
The large dip
Yep.
in 100 West is solved through this infrastructure project.
That's right, it would be. So I did not mention it. Thank you, Mayor.
So,
It would be
Chuck,
part of
in regards to that, because when we had our rain incident, Swanee Park became a pond, and most of that water was coming from the dip there, the blunder. So is that how that is going to be fixed? I mean, would it stay a swimming pool if we had another incident like we did a couple weeks ago?
Right now, what we will do is we'll pipe that ditch so that the dip isn't there. One of the earlier versions of this were to put in a detention basin in the park that would mitigate that and, could be used still as a recreational area, but we didn't pursue that because we don't know. But at the very minimum, the road would not be flooded. We would still have water going into the park. You can still see my screen, this is the channel that goes across the park. It would still be delivered to that channel and then come out on the other side of 400 North.
So we would fix the conveyance of the water into that channel as opposed to into the dip of despair?
That's right. That's exactly right. The road crossing would be piped, but the water still has to get at the end of the pipe, would go into the park, and this channel, we deliver it up to this channel.
And this is, Kevin, that's a great question, because this is something that's come up time and time again since we had the flood 2 weeks ago. Our engineering for these projects are about 50-year events is what we engineer for. And that storm was a once in 200-year event. And we don't engineer for those types of events because the life of the product isn't going to happen in the life of the storm, most likely. And so everyone kept saying your system failed. The system didn't fail. It was over inundated. It's not designed to handle a once every 200-year storm. So it's not that it failed as much as we don't design for that level of a storm. It's not cost effective. And so in something like this, we would try and mitigate it so it didn't flood and make a lake out of the whole park. But I want to be clear, we probably can't design a system for a once in every 200-year event. Something like that comes along again, it's probably going to flood.
Well, and our system actually is meant to, I don't know that everyone knows this because they were taking pictures of their street saying, this is outrageous, but our stormwater catchment plan is that water conveys to our streets and then down to our creeks and then out to the river. Yep. So when people were seeing the streets running like rivers, that was a good thing. Yep. We just didn't like it breaching into places, so. But that conveyance, or that ditch is meant to convey water, so.
I mean, even in minor
it's
weather,
bad.
it is always that.
It's always
that
awful,
puddle,
yeah.
And we can definitely fix that, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, is there a motion about this project to move forward with cost sharing with UDOT at this time?
I move. Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
You're good.
I move to approve the federal aid agreement for local agency project with UDOT for design and construction of a roundabout at the intersection of 400 North and 100 West in the amount of $78,329.
Thank you, Karen.
Second.
Mike, second. Discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I don't know why, no.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. And we are at approval of bills against the city of Moab. Tawny?
I move to pay the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $225,084,011.
Thank you, Tawny. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Did you want to share anything?
No, Summer and I talked. I had to go back and do a couple over.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?